Hello everyone, my name is Miranda, but you probably know me better by my Instagram name at Mother of Serpents. Today I thought I'd talk to you guys about breeding, more specifically things that I learned throughout the breeding process. When I say breeding, I mean more of the egg hatching process, and things that I think that anyone who wants to breed ball pythons should probably know about. And while this video is going to pertain specifically to ball pythons, that doesn't mean that it is limited to ball pythons. This can probably be, adapted to any sort of snake or reptile, but in specifically all of my experiences have been with ball pythons, so this is what I'm going to be talking about. This is Lottie, my black pastel het pied ball python. She will likely be the next snake that I breed, so that is why I figured that I'd have her out for this video. Now the first thing to consider when you want to start breeding is to kind of ask yourself why you want to in the first place. If it's something like you want to make money and get rich, or you want to be famous, those are very bad reasons to breed, because those two things are extremely unlikely to happen with how oversaturated the market is, and just the fact that you shouldn't want to be breeding and bringing life and animals into the world to make money and to get something out of it. You should be doing it for love of the animal, or maybe there's a specific morph that you want that you can't just spend thousands of dollars on, so it's easier to kind of make your own. And that brings me into my next thing. People should know that breeding can always be risky. There is never the guarantee that things are going to go smoothly or as planned, and that's why I recommend that people who want to start breeding have vet money saved up. Females can easily become egg bound. It's very easy if you don't know what you're doing to overbreed males. If you are pairing snakes, always give the males a couple days off after they're done locking. This prevents them from dying. It is possible for a male to die from being overbred, so just be mindful that you're giving him a break, and then hopefully everything should be smooth sailing from there. You should also want to make sure that your snakes are old enough to breed. The general rule is that people say that females should be between 15 and 100 grams to start breeding, and I guess this is true, but you're definitely more likely to get a healthy clutch of snakes if you have a small sexually mature female, so about 3 years old and say 1,200 grams. It will probably produce a healthier clutch of eggs than say a 1-year-old 1,600 gram female. Likely that female has just been power fed and is not sexually mature at all. She is just an overweight female, and when you get snakes like that are young and overweight, it's very likely that the clutch will probably slug out, as in you will only get infertile eggs and you will not get any viable ones. Why disappoint yourself and just wait until your snake is 3 years old if you want to start breeding? With that being said, even when everything is done right, if you have an older female, if she becomes gravid and she lays eggs, that does not necessarily mean that everything is going to be okay. Even if you chose snakes that aren't prone to deformities and the incubation process was still okay, likely there's still a possibility that you're going to get deformed babies. It's possible that when the eggs hatch, the babies inside will be deceased. You just never really know what's going to happen when you're breeding. Not every single clutch is going to be a healthy one. People are really reluctant to share their stories, I believe, because they feel like it's, their fault. And honestly, this just happens in nature all the time. It really isn't anyone's fault when babies hatch deformed. There are some things that can contribute to that, such as incorrect and unstable temperatures during incubation. If there are temperature spikes, so say you're incubating your clutch at 88 degrees and suddenly it goes up to 95, or if you're incubating it at 90 degrees and suddenly it drops down into the low 80s, things like that can contribute to deformed clutches hatching, but this is not a guarantee. Sometimes you can do everything right and have perfectly monitored temperatures and the clutch will still hatch to be deformed, and that's just something that if you're not willing to deal with, these babies a lot of times will not thrive. They will need to be culled, or basically they need to be put down, so just make sure that that's something that you're prepared to take on. There is a little bit of a debate in the topic of egg cutting. If you don't know what egg cutting is, a lot of people will take straight razors, and when the egg is past, for ball pythons, the general rule is 55 to 60 days is when the eggs should be pipping. So the snakes will kind of poke out with their egg tooth and they'll look out into the world, but they'll stay in the egg. They won't actually come out and hatch yet. And a lot of breeders, what they will do is they will cut outer layer of the shell to kind of peek in, just to make sure that everything is healthy, as well as to see what morph they got. That's another thing. Just because the odds may be in your favor, there's really no guarantee that those odds are going to come true. It's really just, you get what you get. So don't be disappointed if you didn't hit the snake that you were going for. You can always try again. So back to egg cutting. In ball pythons, as long as it is day 55 or past, there is nothing wrong with carefully cutting the eggs. If it's your first time, make sure that there is a breeder or someone who has done it before to help you. Or in my case, I just watched lots of YouTube videos while FaceTiming my breeder friend, and she was able to walk me through the process. A lot of people say to just let them hatch naturally. When I did this to the clutch that hatched in June, one of the babies actually, the umbilical cord was wrapped around her, so we kind of had to untangle her, and if that hadn't have happened, there is the chance that she could have drowned and died in the egg. So it's for reasons like this that I don't have an issue with egg cutting. Really, it's your clutch of snakes, do whatever you want. Don't let people try to make you feel bad about it. As long as you are doing it safely, there is nothing wrong with cutting eggs. Now, there's really no way to gauge how many eggs your snake is going to lay. So just be mindful that there's no guarantee that these snake babies are going to sell. There are plenty of breeders who hold back hatchling snakes and end up raising them into adults because they don't sell. Now, if you're only equipped to care for babies and you don't have the space for, say, 3-4 adult-sized ball pythons, that's something that you need to keep in mind, because there is no guarantee that people are going to buy them. So you might have these snakes for years. There's no way to guess what's going to happen, and for that reason, you just always need to be prepared at all times to keep back any hatchlings that don't sell. Now, some things that a lot of people might not know is that the babies, the hatchlings, they can all be kept in the same bin up until their first shed. This is probably 1 to 2 weeks after hatching. They're actually, I've heard that they are blind in this state, so they're usually very, very shiny. Their scales are very shiny. They will probably be very, very laid back and almost kind of lethargic, and this is just because that's just how they are after hatching. However, when that first shed happens, they all need to be separated then, and a lot of times they will lose that kind of shiny hatchling sheen, and they will start growing and developing their own patterns. This is also where the snakes start getting very defensive. You will find that if you are holding and interacting with the hatchlings right after they came out of the egg, and then their first shed comes around, they will probably be very nippy. It is highly likely that you're going to get bit by them. I will say their bites don't feel like anything. There are times where I was being bit all the time when I was cleaning their enclosures. Honestly, you don't feel it. You just look down and your hand's a little bloody, and the only reason that it bleeds so much is because their saliva has a blood thinner in it, so there's no reason to worry. Just make sure that you wash it with soap and water, and eventually, maybe after months, they will calm down. Honestly, it really depends on the snake. Some of them do a little bit better after being handled. Some of them, this can stress them out even more and make them even more defensive, and it's for that reason that you kind of have to work individually with each ball python. Especially when they are babies, they do tend to calm down into adulthood, but not always. Sometimes you just will have a defensive snake and there's not really much you can do about it. So now on the topic of feeding the hatchlings. Hatchlings should be fed more often than your typical ball python. I believe most breeders say every 3 to 5 days is how often hatchlings should be fed. And you probably should make sure that since they are eating so often, and you could have a lot of them, that you have a steady supply of hopper mice. Ball pythons should never be eating pinky mice. Those are not nutritious and they are way, way, way too small. It's also very likely that hatchlings are going to eat live. It is very unlikely, but not unheard of, for ball pythons to eat frozen right out of the egg. You kind of just have to work with each hatchling again and find out. I'm getting mail. Of the 7 snakes that I hatched, 6 of them ate live hoppers on their first try. One of them, she refused meals, and I was getting kind of worried because I wasn't sure what to do. I did try to feed her frozen mice. I tried live rat pups. She still wasn't eating until one day I tried frozen rats. A frozen rat pup, and then she took that right away. For whatever reason, it turned out that she just only ate frozen rats. Something to point out is breeding is not for everyone. Not everyone who owns snakes was made to be a breeder. A lot of people try it just because they want to and they want to get the full experience, and they might only produce one clutch. Some people fall in love with it and that's what they decide to keep doing. But you know, there's nothing wrong with just owning snakes for pleasure. You can have one snake and want to be a breeder. You can have multiple snakes and not want to ever breed. It's really all what you want to do individually. And the good thing about snakes living for so long is that you don't have to decide right away. You have a very long time to decide if you want to breed, if you don't want to breed, if you just want a pet. The one last thing that I should say to kind of know before you breed snakes is if you name the hatchlings, it's game over. You're gonna want to keep them, you're going to get attached, And if that's okay, there's nothing wrong with keeping them. Just make sure that you are able to successfully. It does become a little bit of work, but it is definitely all worth it. Breeding is an extremely rewarding process, but I would not recommend that everyone does it. It is a lot more work than people think that it is, and I would always recommend that if you want to try breeding your own clutch, you should probably try to find a mentor first that can kind of walk you through and help everything. Personally, I had my snake friend Mandy. We were FaceTiming through the hatching process. When Delilah was laying eggs, she was there through all of it, and she could not have been more helpful. And even if you think you know everything, nothing is going to help you like the one-on-one first-hand experience of a seasoned breeder. So always, if you can find a mentor, I would say that that would greatly improve the process and make things easier. I don't really have much else to say on that. Those are just the things that I would want people to know before they started breeding. So if anyone has any more questions, I will be more than happy to help answer them. Let me know what you guys want to see in next week's video. Until then, take care. Bye, guys. I'm so sorry, Lottie.